can see the panic. I saw the fear in Tim Scott's eyes when Tucker Carlson asked him the follow-up question. So let's watch this.
Amen. So, a nation that great has to be aware of threats to its very existence.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, Biden mobilized reserves. What do you think of that? And are you concerned that we're moving, as we seem to be, toward war with Russia?
One thing I want to add too, this was the first question of the night. So Tucker Carlson wasn't fucking around. Like the first question the first question of the night was, hey, what are you going to do about this World War III shit that Biden is starting? Unlike the corporate media, they were talking about the Supreme Court or some other bullshit. But anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, so I would say that without any question, we should never allow American soldiers to be engulfed into the challenge between Ukraine and Russia. Our boots on the ground should not be there. The ability.
He almost won him over.
My mama wanted a preacher, so I'm going to stand up and do it the Southern way.
Preach!
Hallelujah! So, literally, I think one of the failures of President Biden has been his inability to articulate America's national vital interest.
So it was him, not Mike Pence. It was Tim Scott that said it. His problem that he didn't communicate it right. Anyway, I'll continue.
In the conflict or the genocide in Ukraine, America's national vital interest is degrading the Russian military. When we degrade the Russian military, we make sure that our home front is safer and that our NATO ally.
So he's trying to convince you that we got to fight this war in Ukraine because if we don't, Russia's going to invade America.
Yes, that's what he's saying.
So they use flower talk to cover how ridiculous and how crazy they are. We need to bring reality. We need to use normal talk to describe what they're saying. So when people say this, because you hear this on CNN and MSNBC all the time, when they say we want to degrade Russian military to protect American interests, what they're saying is we got to beat Russia so Russia doesn't invade the United States and Europe, which is absurd. It's an absurd thing to think that's going to happen. Meanwhile, let it continue.
Partners that would cause us to send soldiers over is safe. When we have the land contiguous with Ukraine safe, we keep our American soldiers at home, and our primary objective should only be to engage when America's vital national interests are being engaged in. Unfortunately, President Biden has no ability to understand and appreciate what that looks like.
Wait, may I ask? So you're saying that it's in our national interest, vital national interest, to degrade the Russian military, in other words, to fight Russia with other people's soldiers?
I would say it this way. If you think about the world order that we established after World War II.
Well, you guys see the panic? Because he wasn't expecting that follow-up question. Anyway, I'll let it continue.
You think about a rules-based system. Where does a rules-based system come from? It comes from this nation, our Judeo-Christian foundation, that says that there are rules of the road, that there is something called absolute truth. And we...
Does this sound like a psychopath to you or not?
Yeah, he's just talking. He's just talking and trying to say, he's just trying to throw red meat to them, and he doesn't know what to say. He didn't expect that question from. Yeah. He did not expect that.
Yeah, that's why you can see the panic. I'm gonna rewind it just a few seconds because I want you guys to analyze his ideology, his worldview. Remember, we break down the rules-based order on RBN all the time. Go ahead, Jimmy. Go ahead.
No, that's just a bullshit talking point. The rules-based orders is whatever the fuck the United States and NATO says it is at any given time. And if it serves our interest, then it's a rules-based order. And if it doesn't, it's not. And what rule-based order says that the United States could build a military base in Syria so we could keep taking their oil and their wheat production? What part of a rules-based order is that? What part of rules-based order said we could do what he did to Libya or Syria? Or that there's no rules-based order. The people who break the rules-based order is the United States of America. We're the world's terrorists. That's not hyperbole. That's exact fact. And this is proving it. And we've gone around provoking Russia into this conflict in Ukraine. And now everybody admits that the only reason they did the Minsk Accord, the peace treaty in 2014, was so they could buy some time to bulk up so they could eventually go and break the peace treaty, which they never instituted anyway. And so now the people who are lying at every turn is not Russia. It's not Putin. It's, again, NATO and the imperialists and Joe Biden and the neocons. It's the United States. We are the world's terrorists. And the rest of the world knows this.
And I don't get how these people literally admit to, basically provoking Russia, pushing soldiers, putting soldiers or using other people's soldiers to fight their military. And you guys are gonna tell me that Russia is it's the bad guys here. Now, I'm not saying it's a good or bad guy here. Of course, Putin is a anti-communist or whatever the fuck. But I'm not looking at Putin the way I'm looking at Obama. Like, Obama got way more blood on his hands than motherfucker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obama, one of our presidents. It's just crazy how these people can admit it, and their supporters will be like, no, Russia is the bad guy. Putin is the bad guy. Nigga, we are admitting to killing people and provoking people with NATO. Overthrowing, we just did a coup in 2014 over there in Ukraine. They admitted it. People too idiot.
But that's never brought up. That's never brought up in the corporate news that there was a coup. Rachel Maddow's never going to tell people that the CIA did a coup with the Nazis and overthrew their government, and the people in the eastern part, the Russian speakers, they didn't want to go along with the coup government, and that's where this is all coming from, because it was all instigated by the United States and the CIA once again, because we wanted this. So no, they're never told this. What they're told is Putin. Well, they have never been told that the Durham report happened and that we all figured out that Russiagate was a hoax, was committed on us by the DNC and the FBI. They don't know that either. When I tell people, I go to comedy clubs every night of my life. When I tell people this, my comedian friends, about the Durham report, you know what they say to me? They go, well, where did you hear about this? That's what they say. Like, where are you getting this information? I'm like, it's at the Justice Department's website. It's the Durham report. It's not a secret. But it is to them, because if they don't see it, Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow tell it to them, or if it's not on the front page of the New York Times or Jeff Bezos' owned Washington Post, then it's not news. And so that's why the Durham report, it wasn't news. It's not news because the establishment didn't want it to be. It doesn't end up in the corporate press. And so regular people don't know anything about it. And it's not news. But what is news? Fucking Bud Light.
People that's into politics, I say they are into politics because they don't, they're not really into it. They don't want to change. They just, like their favorite politician or their favorite mouthpiece teaching them they bullshit. Like this, I think it's all a game to these people at the end of the day. Because how can you look at all what's going on and still choose to be a part?
CJ, do you remember that host who's apparently a comedian? Apparently,
Francesca, yeah, she's Francesca. Do you know her, Jimmy? You know Francesca over on TYT? Do you know?
They
who
say she's a comedian.
Yeah, she's a pro-war simp. Yeah, she's a war
her.
I know you don't pay attention to stuff, but I know they had a clip where they was talking about how MSNBC is better than Fox News, and Emma had actually admitted something years too late, but she said, yeah, I think the Russia state stuff was kind of nonsense. And her co-host, who's apparently a comedian, she's like, yeah, but actually some of that Russia stuff is true.
She said riveting. She said some of that was riveting, wasn't it? It was like, what?
So and I bring that up to comedians, like, apparently she's a working comedian by Russiagate, despite all the evidence, like the Durham report that Jimmy also brings up. Now, I'm going to continue the clip because I'm going to show you guys.
That's so weird, Nick, because usually comedians are ahead of the curve in talking about things like this when it's not popular, like talking against war when it's not popular. It's so weird to see so many comedians just kind of fall in line. Same thing like with country music, how country music is completely different than what it used to be. It was completely anti-establishment, and now it's like, it's like on board as being pop. But also about, this is what I was going to say earlier, I didn't now remember. Things are so flipped. Republicans are kind of like, they're having to run like walking on eggshells because their constituents don't want a war, but they have to go out and talk against it or talk about being pro-war without sort of rallying up the base. And you're seeing Tim Scott sort of trying to thread this needle now. And then you go to the left, and the left is the complete opposite, where we'll get to this in another segment. They're trying to chastise Cornel West because of what he said about NATO. It's just so
Yes.
it's so
What?
bizarre. Yeah, it's so bizarre what's happening right now in politics. But go ahead.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that segment. That's gonna be fun. But I'm gonna get back to
you gotta kill these people in Jesus' name, amen.
Go ahead.
So let's discuss I'm gonna play this part again because now after hearing Jimmy's explanation how the United States are hypocrites regarding the rules-based order. If you don't know what the rules-based order, essentially the United States can do it, you can't do it. So we can have 800 military bases around the world, but God forbid China and Cuba does military exercises next to each other. Then all of a sudden China is being the aggressor because they had the audacity to have relations with people in our hemisphere, but the United States can do whatever they want. And this is why I said from the beginning, and Jimmy said from the beginning, me and Pierre the Gray Zone said from the beginning, the Black Agenda Report said from the beginning that the Ukrainian war was not about protecting Ukrainian people. It's about maintaining this bullshit rules-based order where the United States is on top. And that's why Russia is teaming up with China and they got a tighter relationship. That's why you see the expansion of BRICS. That's why you see South Africa and many African countries pushing back against this because they're tired of this rules-based order that he's about to explain once again. So you guys going to hear this psychopath because when I hear this part, I hear a straight up psychopath. Let's listen to
based system. Where does the rules-based system come from?
I'll go back.
It comes
the Russian military, in other words, to fight Russia with other people's soldiers.
I would say it this way. If you think about the world order that we established after World War II, you think about a rules-based system. Where does the rules-based system come from? It comes from this nation, our Judeo-Christian foundation, that says that there are rules of the road, that there is something called absolute truth. And we established that.
Absolute truth. Doesn't it sound like a crazy person?
As a part of that absolute truth, what we're trying to do is make sure that our home front remains safe. Keeping our home front safe means that evaluating the actual threats to our country, the most immediate military threat that could happen is Russia. Why is a good question. You look at their 6th generation jets, you look at their hypersonic.
So at this point, Tim Scott says that we looking out for our natural interests. So we got to look at the most powerful foe and take them out before they attack us. So in order to prevent war, we got to start war first. You guys know that's what he's saying, right?
Yeah, it's the preemptive war of George Bush.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you guys notice how when Tucker Carlson pushed, like first he started out with some flowery bullshit, right? That most reporters will let him get away with. Then Tucker came with the follow-up question that forced him to tell the truth. So then he was like, no, actually this is about establishing our world order. You go back to the World War II. Which is what NATO is about, pushing back against Russia, Soviet Union, any outside geopolitical threat. And he was forced to tell the truth there for a second. Obviously, no one buys it, though. Let's continue. Almost a little bit left
He's still admitting to using other people's land and other people's soldiers to fight for their fucking wars.
Yes. Psychopath. So Ukrainians got to die for our national security. Anyway, let's continue.
You look at their nuclear arsenal. Everything that we do that degrades the Russian military is good for America. You look at the long-term threat to our nation, it's China. Their existential threat that we face long-term becomes China. You look at this rising axis of evil that we're seeing being formed. It's Russia, China, and Iran. Breaking that to pieces before it gets started, I think.
Russia, China, and Iran. What did I tell you? What if you watch RBN? It's just predictable. Any country who resists the United States is the axis of evil. Russia, China, and Iran and their leaders, their body count pales in comparison to ours. Yeah. Their human rights violation pales in comparison to ours.
Is in our vital interest.
So on the day last February that Russia invaded eastern Ukraine, Russia and China were not allied. But within weeks of the sanctions that we applied and the stated intent of the Biden administration to effectively wage war with Russia, you saw an alignment which now hardened between Russia and China. The United States military cannot, as you know, since you oversee it as a member of the Senate, cannot actually defeat Russia and China united. And so it would seem that the Biden policies have created a larger threat, no?
Now that's an amazing comeback by Tucker because Tucker takes his premise at face value. So I explained why his premise was bullshit. But Tucker like, all right, let's take your premise. Let's take your premise that we were waging this war to protect ourselves. But after this war, Russia and China is now more united, and now we got a bigger threat. So he said, based on your argument, the United States policy has been a failure. So that's brilliant by Tucker here. Like, that's an amazing follow-up. Well, let's continue. This clip almost over, and then we have just 2 more clips for this segment.
Well, I would say it by looking back to 2014.
Get your ass down.
There are 2 times that we've seen incursions in Ukraine that create peril for America. The first time was under President Obama when he drew that red line in Syria and nothing happened, which gave permission to Putin to come in and take Crimea. The second time we saw was when President Biden sat back and watched as Scholz in Germany led the Western alliance to provide resources to Ukraine, which was a mistake colossal on our part. So what you saw was President Biden saying to Putin, I'm going to give you a list of areas that we don't want you to have cyber attacks. Weakness. Second that we saw.
He exposed himself as a neocon, and these candidates, their political aspirations is over because they expose themselves as just being people who repeat neocon liberal orthodoxy. Who's smart enough to see to think outside the lines on the Ukraine war? Who's going to repeat the establishment talking points? Go ahead, Jimmy, if you want to chime in.
Well, I don't understand who the. So because that's why Russia took Crimea. Hey, guess what? Crimea is not part of the United States. Guess what? And why do I give a fuck? Ukraine also not part of the United States. Russia not part of the United States. Syria not part of the fucking United States. What the fuck are we doing? Of course, it's got nothing to do with anything this fucking guy is saying. It has to do with. But it's good. You're right. It was great that Tucker took him at face value. If your big idea is somehow the Ukraine war makes the United States stronger, it's exactly you have an ass backwards fuckface because now the whole world is not only joining together militarily, but they're now joining together in economic unions. This is the stuff that they said Trump was going to make people do. He was going to make the world turn against us. Even our friends wouldn't want to work with us because of Trump, and then they were going to form alliances to work against us. That's what's happening right now under Joe Biden, and it's because of the things the Joe Biden neocon administration is doing. It's because of Ukraine, South Africa, Brazil, India. They all right now. Saudi Arabia is selling oil in other denominations besides the dollar, so the petrodollar is on its way out too. So this whole everything Joe Biden touched it turns to what they said was going to happen under Trump. It didn't happen under Trump. It's happening under them because America's done with our fucking warmongering and our imperialism, which they always have to pay the price for. Europe's paying the price for us blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. The whole point of the Ukraine war is because the United States and the West then never always feared Russia coming together with Germany. And so it was Russia's manpower and their natural resources in Germany with their capital and their engineering. We didn't want them coming together. Well, they came together in the Nord Stream pipeline, and that's why we blew that motherfucker up. And that's so. And the fact that Germany goes along with this is also mental. It just goes to show you the power of NATO and the power of the international security state and the military industrial complex that is worldwide.
Absolutely. CJ Roman, anything you want to chime in? We just got 2 more clips that we can go through. Just let me know how you're doing on time, Jimmy. CJ Roman, anything else you want to chime in on before we move on?
No, you can play the clips.
I mean, they say that this was going to happen because they knew this was going to happen. We have all types of military operations. We can see wars and us losing wars and whatnot to these countries, but they knew it was going to happen, whether it be under Biden or Trump, because of the fact that we are the police of the world. Like, I was just speaking on this yesterday. You can't go around bullying everybody forever. You might go around and beat everybody ass individually. But what happens when we come together and notice how much power that we can wield together? This is what happening with BRICS, and it's rightfully so, man. I appreciate BRICS because they are showing the world, like, look, a change is gonna have to come. We're gonna bring a change to the world.
You have Lula and you have African leaders, including the Kenyan president, that is openly calling for de-dollarization. Mm-hmm. So that's why it was a brilliant tactic. I'm gonna start doing that more regarding these neocons that say, "Oh, we got to fight." Because I usually dismantle their point. Like, no, I don't believe that's your argument. But sometimes, like, their argument don't even make sense at face value, because face value, if your job was to make America stronger, to protect our national interests, Europe is weaker.
Yeah.
The United States economy is in shambles because our insistence on the Ukraine war. BRICS is forming, and people are tired of weaponized sanctions, and the Russians weaponized sanctions pushed us over the edge. And so the United States policy made the UN between Russia and China strong, which is why that's such a great point once again.